Welcome back, YouTube. It's your girl Shyreeta 21, and thank you for joining me on my 2021 braid challenge. This time I'm going to be doing the stitched box braids or pop smoke box braids. I am starting off with 3 layers in my head. So I did a bottom layer with 3 sections on it. I did my middle layer with a middle part and 6 sections on it. And then I did the top layer, which I also did a middle part on, and I have 3 sections on each side. What I'm using to assist me, of course, is a mirror so I can see the back of my head. I bought one of these combs with the parting tooth at the top to try to help me with the stitches. And I bought the Spectra Braid 3X pack, 26 inch with the 1B30, so it's blended out at the ends. And I ended up using the majority of this, but only the 1 pack. In addition, to make the process a little easier, I am using my spool thread holder in order to section off the hair. I pinched off the same amount of hair for each of my feed-in sections. So I am just going to take the hair and pinch off and section that off. And I'm trying to show you how much I'm pinching, but I don't know if I'm really getting that across. You might be able to see it, but I tried to keep the sections all the same for my entire head as far as the pieces that I feed in. And I just do this until I fill up the spool holder. I did have to do this a few times to get through all of my hair, but that's just how I started the process off. So I did each of the sections pretty much the same way. I'm just putting my hair up in a clip to kind of concentrate on the one section. Pull the twist apart and detangle it to start. And I'm using Shine and Jam to outline the entire section. So I go across the top of the square, the 2 sides and the bottom to make sure I have Shine and Jam around the entire section of that box braid. And then I kind of comb through the section to smooth it down with that Shine and Jam, and then use the metal tail on that comb to define my part. And then of course, smoothing down all the way around the entire section. Now I'm trying to flatten it towards the middle as well so that I can start my process with my stitch braid. My first row of my stitch, I kind of part a section off on the top. So I make that first row the start of my braid. So I'm just sectioning that off into 3 pieces, and I'm going to start braiding. So 1, 2, and this is where I would start feeding the hair in. So kind of checking it in the mirror to make sure my stitch looks good so far. I can see the part in there. Now normally I would have fed the hair in first, but I think I was concentrating too much on the stitches. So I just pulled a section off of the stitch, fed the hair in. And now I'm going to try to pull my stitch on the other side. Now this is where I needed 3 arms because I can't hold the mirror and section my hair and hold the braid all at the same time. So I'm trying to kind of put my finger in the spot that I see in the mirror and then put the mirror down and pick up the comb and use that. I fed the other tail end of my feed-in braid, and now I'm going back to stitching on the other side. I can't really see the stitches like talking about it, so I'm struggling here. This is where I should have been feeding in another piece of hair, but I'm concentrating on the stitches and it's just not working out at all. So I tried to start over again with that beginning part to start my braid off. All right, getting it a little closer so you can probably see a little better what I'm doing. When I do my feed-ins, I do 1, 2 on the first braid and then feed in on the 3rd leg, if that makes sense. Here I am trying to use my fingernails to do the stitches. So I'm still not completely giving up on the stitch braid, but I'm just trying to use my fingernails. Normally, once I come around to this side, I would be pulling that leg of the braid, the feed-in hair, back in through it. But I forgot. Again, I'm still concentrating on the stitches. So I have just fed another piece of hair in. I'm picking that comb back up to see if I can use that again with the stitches, but I'm holding the comb in my hand and I still use my fingernail. I'm all over the place. I grabbed the tail that I missed and fed that through. And again, still trying to use my fingernails. I think that the fingernail method would have worked better if my nails were longer. And I also think that practice makes perfect. As I continue to practice these stitch braids, I might get a little bit better. But I wasn't completely giving up, even though I pretty much knew that it wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to. What I decided is that I would just continue to practice the stitch method, but at worst, it was just going to be some regular cornrow box braids. So we'll see how that goes. I continue to feed the braids in. You'll see, I'm going to show you a couple of feed-in braids as we go. I was not consistent in the number of hair segments, if you will, that I was adding on. So some of them have more than others. I just kind of did it by feel. But you can still see that even as I get to the end of the cornrow, I can still feed hair in if I feel like the braid is not thick enough. So that's what I did as I went along these braids. And a word of caution, if you are using the Spectra braid hair, this hair loves to tangle up. So if you just keep feeding in and you don't stop and kind of pull your fingers through it, it's going to tangle up on itself. So as long as you catch it before it gets too bad, it won't slow you down. But if you ignore it, you will spend a significant amount of time trying to detangle this hair. So be mindful of that. Of course, I'm just going to continue to braid my hair all the way down to the ends to finish. You are going to notice a lot of dancing, bopping, and rapping through this video. This is my efforts to get through my hair because I don't feel like doing it. So sometimes you got to put some music on and get it done. But this is what my first braid looks like. And of course, the curse of the first braid, I didn't like it, so I ended up taking it out, but I'm not going to show that to you. We're just going to move on to the second braid here. So I'm doing the same process, parting that first section off to start my braid. So I started my braid and now I'm feeding in the first section. Working that in and feeding in the second section. And I had a pinky nail on one hand and a pointer nail on the other hand. So I'm trying to use those to create the sections for the stitch braid. And continuing with my feed-in method. There I'm using the thumbnail, but you know, we're gonna get through it. And you'll also notice as I work this one, I'm not bothering with the mirror as much. I'm just trying to do it by feel like I normally would do if I was doing a feed-in braid. Because I'm doing this braid on my own head, I can't keep going back to this mirror. I have to try to get through the braid. So I decided that I would make the best stitches that I possibly could blindly. And as I continue to progress through this braid, it is stitched. It's not perfect. And I do think that the kind of gel that I'm using, as well as my hair texture, plays a role in that. But again, like I said, practice makes perfect. This is my first time really trying to do stitch braids all over my head like this. So I'm just going to keep practicing as I go through each of these squares. I never really gave up on it through the entire process. If they didn't come out, I didn't redo them. I just moved on to the next one. But I tried to do this stitch process on every one of these braids because I figured, you know, I got this whole head of braids to And you can see there, even though I'm not really watching the mirror for the purpose of the stitch braids, it still does come in handy to check the mirror periodically, make sure you don't have any stray hairs that you missed when you were feeding the hairs in, because sometimes that can get a little messy, especially with the way I do it, where I kind of pull the hair towards the front. So Just keep checking it in the mirror if you are doing your own hair, but you can see that I'm not really looking in the mirror for the majority of it. So I ran into some issues with my SD card and my camera stopped recording. But this is what I ended up doing the first night, was the bottom layer and then a large portion of the second layer as well, just pretty much completing the back of my head. So I talked before about the thinner areas that I have towards my hairline. So I wanted to do something a little bit different with these front pieces. Instead of using the Shine and Jam, I'm using the Edge Fixer by Kiss. This is the glued max hold gel, and this is the one with Sweetie on the ads. I picked the Sweet Peach scent. They have a lot of different scents there, but I believe it's all the same gel formula. And I didn't get a large bottle. I got a little small one because I just plan on using this on my front section. But to be quite honest, I wonder if my stitch braids would have come out better if I used this on my whole head to do the stitches instead of using the Shine and Jam, because it was a better holding gel. And I think that that would have helped a little bit better with making the part. And you can see that using that edge brush helps to give me some extra coverage over that thin section, but this gel is way thicker and has a lot more hold to it, so it's definitely giving me coverage. I'm using the Shine and Jam on the rest of the section, on the back section and towards the top, just because, like I said, I didn't feel like the hold was that necessary with just doing the regular cornrow. I only wanted it on the front section. So I start this section off just like I did with all the others, where I created that part at the top to start the braid off. But as I do this feed-in braid, I'm trying to be more mindful of the, I guess the section that I've already kind of laid the edges down in the front. I don't really want to mess it up. I've kind of put the hair where I want it to as far as the coverage, but at the same time, I'm still trying to do these stitch braids. And this is where I had a question mark about the whole stitch process. This whole section, whether it's the very front on the perimeter or even towards the back of it where I had that Shine and Jam, this whole section is just thinner hair than the back of my hair. So I wonder if, you know, the texture of your hair, if you have thicker natural hair, if you're going to be able to see the stitches as much as you would if it's on a finer texture hair anyway. But then on top of that, that thicker gel, that Kiss gel, really held the stitches better. And you'll notice that as we come across the front too, that you can kind of see the parts in my head. So still trying to slick it down with the edge brush, but I can create defined parts in that section. Is that because it's thin, or is that because it has thicker gel on it? But I feel like you can even see the stitches better even on the back side with the Shine and Jam. But then of course on the one braid where I get some stitches to show, I decided to just comb them out. I think that was just because I wasn't feeling the whole aspect of, like I said, that section is thin. So I think it was looking a little too spacey for me, and I just decided to comb through it. But in hindsight and watching the video, I'm like, you can actually see, look at the back of it. You can actually see the stitches in this section where I don't know if that's just because I had practiced on, 7 braids ahead of time, or if this was a thinner section of hair. So and I combed that out too. So maybe it was just that it was a thinner section of hair, and so the stitches were showing up better. But it's something to think about, I guess, if I'm going to continue to practice doing stitch braids and other hairstyles. And you can see that I'm comparing this to the braid next to it. Of course, the section next to it is a thicker section of hair, so I decided not to add any more hair to it. But keep that in mind, of course, as you want your braids to look more consistent, you may choose to add more hair onto a thinner section. So that front braid on the opposite side of my head, I pretty much did the same thing. I'm not going to show it to you because I think I was just feeling awkward because I was pulling from the other side of my head and I wasn't sure if it was even showing up on camera. But I did put the kiss gel. You can see that the edges are laid down on that one too. And I'm just going to do the same exact process on that one that I did on the first one. Moving to this top section of my head, I kind of changed my camera angle to try to capture the top, but I don't know if that was really a good idea. I can't really see it in most of the shots, but what I did want to show you when I'm doing this braid is shaped like a triangle instead of being the square like the other braids were. And that was important because I am going to feed this one so that it goes in between the 2 braids below it. I started the same way I did before, where I parted off my first section for the braid. As far as starting the braid off, but I parted off a triangle instead of parting off a longer section. But anytime you're doing these jumbo braid styles, you want to make sure that your braids are falling between each other. As far as your parting, you want to bricklay your parting and then lay the braids in between each other, because otherwise you're going to have like a bulky look to your head if the braids are laying on top of each other. So with this one being at the top, I didn't want it to go straight back because it would have fell on top of the braid below it. And if it went straight to the side, it would have fell on top of the braid below it there too. So it has to go at an angle. So that's why this one is shaped like a triangle instead of a square or a rectangle. And again, I had good intentions with this camera angle. It was working when I tilted my head backwards some. You could see the top better, but now I'm literally looking at the floor as I'm braiding. This is another one of those things that you do when you're braiding your own hair and you're not looking at it. As I imagine myself braiding, I kind of like stare at a point on the floor or point on the wall, and it's no telling what direction my head is actually pointing in when I'm trying to record. So I apologize for that. I didn't really show this in the other braids, but you also want to make sure as you're detangling that you detangle your hair at the ends too, so that you can smooth it and blend it into the braid. I detangle my hair and then I come over the ends with some Shine and Jam to kind of slick it down and make sure that it smooths in. I go one strand at a time, smoothing it over, and then I take the comb and comb through it so that it blends through. And I'm having a whole party while I'm doing this. I'm listening to Beyonce this time though. And And here's a look at those two corner braids at the very top and how they're laying in between the braids below it. All right, nothing too special about the other two braids in the middle of the top section. I just went on and installed those. Again, you can't really see the stitches, but they are basic feed-in cornrows. All right, these top two braids, I did the same thing that I did on the front braids on the bottom section. And that was where I did the Shine and Jam in the back, and then I used the Kiss Gel towards the front. And that was just to make sure that I had the most coverage, and then also to lay it down. I mean, it is a thicker braid, so I just wanted the hairline to be more sleek and lay the edges down. And there I go jamming again. Leave a comment below if you know what song I'm singing. I already told you it's Beyonce. And you can see here when I go to part this top section like I was doing on all the other braids, I do not part through that section that I've already laid down with the gel because I didn't want to mess that up. I wanted to keep that loose, but I'm just taking my part across the top just like before. You can notice too that as I'm working this front braid that I'm laying this in front of the braid below it. This is the thing that I like about jumbo box braids and things like that, is that it does give me more coverage when it comes down to my thin areas. I don't really have to worry about like pulling my hair backwards, and the braid is going to kind of lay over the part that's thin anyway. But this is another thing as far as making sure that you bricklay your braids. A lot of times that top braid is going to come more towards the front, and the one below it is going to go backwards but still in front of the ear, so that you can get more coverage and it can look thicker in the front without looking bulky. So this is a quick tip too. After you're done with your braid, you can kind of do some fine tuning and use the tail end of your comb to kind of tuck it underneath the braid, and that'll help to lay the edges down. I'm not going to show you this whole last braid because it's the same thing that I did on the other one, but I did just want to mention this Kiss Gel. I did like it, and I am interested to see how it would be like on the full head, like what difference it would make with the braids. But the only issue that I noticed with it is that when I put oil on my scalp, and then I tried to come back and like relay my edges with it, after some time had passed, if the oil mixed into the Kiss Gel, it turns white. Now I didn't have any major issues with it. I kind of took a washcloth and kind of ran over it, and I was able to wipe up the excess and get the white out. But that's the only issue that I've noticed with it. But even with that happening, it still maintained the hold. I like the gel, so I'm interested in trying it again on a different hairstyle. But so here I'm all finished with the braids, and I am really partying now because I'm done and I'm psyched. I think the hairstyle came out really cute, even though it's not the stitched braids. I think the overall hairstyle with the cornrow box braids is still a really cute style for a jumbo box braid alternative. So I'm using that Garnier Fructis mousse on the roots of my hair just to get those to lay down. If you remember, I have used this mousse before on some of my other styles. If you have not checked them out, go ahead and take a look at some of my other videos in my 2021 Braid Challenge series. And then I'm going to use the paper strips, whatever they're called, the wrap strips, to tie my hair down. This is just to lay the braids down, make sure that they're positioned where I want them to be. You see I'm moving them like behind my ear or in front of my ear based off of the way I want them to be. And then I am just going to tie the top of my head down as much as I possibly can to give that mousse a chance to set. And then I take my kettle, my electric kettle, with the water already boiling, and I am going to go ahead and dip my ends. Doing this by yourself, you just want to be extra careful just to make sure you don't get any splashback when you go to pull your hair out of the water. I usually just pull the hair towards the front so that I can just do it in 2 sections and get it all done. And then after I dip the 2 sections and kind of run the towel over to straighten the ends out, I kind of gather both of them together and do one final dip just towards the ends to make sure that I have all of the crinkles out. And here's an outdoor shot of the finished look. I want to thank you guys again for hanging in there with me. Make sure you hit the like button. I appreciate you sticking around and watching the video, and also for watching the other videos in my DIY braid challenge. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. You know I'm coming back with more braid videos for you for the rest of the year. And of course, I appreciate you guys for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.